Welcome to the Boulder Street Conversations podcast. We're so glad you're here. This podcast exists as a resource to our community to go deeper into the conversations we have on Sundays. We just started a sermon series on the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus teaching in Matthew 5, 6, and 7. Excited to get into the content with you today. Well, we are back at Boulder Street Conversations, which is exciting. It's been a little bit. But we are talking through the Sermon on the Mount. We're kind of back into that series. We took a pause for Christmas, for Advent, and then now we're back in Sermon on the Mount. So, Dan, you shared yesterday. We'd love to just hear a little bit about your feelings on the importance of Sermon on the Mount. Like, why should we keep coming back to it? Why spend from now until Easter talking about it at our church? Just a little bit of why it's so important.
Yeah, I love these three chapters where we just have Jesus, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, laying out kingdom principles and what it looks like to live the Jesus way. And so I think for us to keep coming back to it it's so dense in its invitation to what it looks like to follow Jesus and how we are called to live. And so I think it should be a regular part of our diet. In terms of our Bible reading, our Bible study, of course, all of Scripture. But I think here we have 3 chapters in a row where Jesus just lays out, here's what the kingdom looks like. And for those that have said, I'm switching from me being king to you being king, I need to know what it looks like to be in your kingdom. And so I think this is just a great way to keep coming back to that.
Yeah. So we started talking yesterday through the part of Matthew 5 where Jesus gives, you may have heard it said, but I say to you. And there's a handful of things that he walks through as he teaches, bringing up concepts that the people who are hearing would be very familiar with, and then bringing a deeper understanding that would have probably hit them like a ton of bricks. And so as we walked through that yesterday, you made the comment that I love. Jesus is so smart. It was like almost in passing. You were like, just take a second and think about how brilliant he is as a teacher, which it's totally true. Just as you see it kind of unravel as he goes on, it's like, oh my gosh, this is like so beautifully dense and also succinct, which is like, for me, that's outside of my wheelhouse. Might be able to be dense, but I can't be succinct. But anyway, so if you want to talk a little bit of sort of the pattern that he begins with, you've heard it said, I say to you, and then I think the first one is anger, the idea of anger and murder and how those are intertwined in our hearts and or can be. And so if you just want to start on that, and we can open it up and start having convo.
Yeah, well, we went through Matthew 5, 17 through 38. Which is a big chunk, 17 through 48. 48.
Yeah, 48.
give me 10 more. So I think in that, Jesus said something, as he has just gone through the Beatitudes, that he knows, these people think I'm trying to, cut the law here a little bit. And so he's saying to them, I love what you said, the deeper, there's a deeper obedience rather than the shallow level that he looks at the Pharisees and the scribes of his day that had taken the law and basically said, let's write out all the things we can do and all the things we can't do so that we can get as close to sin as we can, so that we can get as close to living to our comfort or as far from living outside of our comfort, but not break the law. But, so I think Jesus here is where he takes it to the heart level, which I a lot of times we'll say the phrase God knows my heart, and that's a terrifying phrase. Like, God absolutely knows my heart, and so the heart level to me, I don't know if it connected, but to me it's a higher standard, and this is not necessarily always true. I use the example of in marriage, it's a higher standard, but it's not a harder one. Meaning, when I chose to marry Amy and be married to one woman and love one woman the rest of my life, that's a higher standard than just that I could date whoever or love whoever. There's a higher standard to say I'm only going to love one. But because of that love, it's not hard. Mm-hmm. It's not like, I can't do this. This is... Right. And maybe that's not everybody's story. I'm not trying to. But I think that's what Jesus is inviting us into. He's saying, he's not saying, hey, I've come throw out all the rules, because now I'm here. I fulfilled
Yeah.
them, and therefore now we don't have to live by them. He's saying, no, I fulfilled them, therefore, or I am the fulfillment of them. Therefore, there's a deeper obedience to what they were there for, and to walk in that at a heart level, which is challenging because it takes it from the act of murder to just being angry, from the act of adultery to lust, and so that's the invitation that Jesus gives, is to this heart level following of him and embracing. And so even when the psalmist writes, and he writes about, I love your law, I meditate on it day and night. That Bible verse to me is like, what? He had the Torah, he had the Levitical law, and he's like, but then I read Jesus here, and I'm like, oh, there's no doubt Jesus loved the law. And it's because the law and the prophets. And I think I like to imagine Jesus here is just like looking at these people, and he's like, I wrote this. By my Spirit, this was given to people. Yeah. I know, and you guys misunderstood. You've misunderstood the story. You misunderstood the law. Let me give you, here's the why behind the what. And so you're sitting with the author, and he's sharing the why, and it raises the bar. It doesn't lower the bar. It raises the standard. It doesn't lower the standard, but it brings it into relationship and heart and love, not simply duty-earning religious activity.
Yeah, it's not just a bar to clear. I didn't do that, so now I'm good. Yeah. It's actually, I have to engage my heart and relationship with God to find out if I'm bending towards that or away from it. And that's the hard thing. With anger, it's like, am I bending towards hating my brother or considering them less than humans? Is this the point that you got to? And I'm sure we'll talk about that in a little bit, which leads to then murder. Am I bending towards that or am I bending away from that? And that's a much harder thing to discern than did I kill somebody today? Right. You know what I mean? I think I know that one.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Well, we got Eric and Amy here as well.
I know.
So, how are you guys? What hit you guys even as maybe I'll say, going through all of these, it was kind of like Thanksgiving meal, where it's just like, oh my goodness, we're just stuffed. We've eaten so much here. But for me, it was really fun to tackle them all together because it would be easier maybe to separate them out and take them one at a time. But I just see where in Jesus' brain and in his mind where they are building on each other and where they're working together. And each section has its own, I think, takeaway, its own conviction, its own, I got to change my life. And ultimately where Jesus is saying, unless your goodness is better than the Pharisees, then it's not good enough, which would have hit the people like, I can't do that. Yeah. They're the ones that keep all the rules. And then he goes through all this and he ends with, therefore, be perfect. And they're like, oh my God, what do we do? But I think that the invitation through all of them, and I've just said this, but is this, hey, here's the heart of it, and let's take our heart to the Lord. And then if we can deal with those at the root level, we won't have to deal with the fruit of murder or lust or those things. So I don't know, maybe how tackling these all together hit you or didn't, or if it was just like a flood of stuff.
Yeah, I think this all speaks to there is desire, and there's either been disappointment or unmet expectations or needs unmet. And so it's like all of these things come out of a place of not necessarily bad or evil on the inside, but I had a desire and it wasn't met. And so I think in our Christian language, we typically say, I'm frustrated. And I read a book by Henry Nouwen who was talking about how let's just change that word frustration to anger. You're just angry. And I was like, ooh, like in our Christianese, we want to like turn down the intensity of like, oh, it's not that bad. I'm just really frustrated. I'm offended. I'm annoyed. I'm bugged. And it's like, oh, let's call it like it is. Like your anger, your rights were infringed upon. Someone, so funny. Someone said they were going to show up at this time and they were late. They broke their oath. And it's like all of these things like feed each other. And the Lord is calling, and Jesus is calling us to like, okay, like let's search your heart. And where is this causing a rift in our relationship with me and you, Lord, and where is this causing a rift in these relationships? And ultimately, at the heart level, it's Jesus saying, I care about your heart because I care about relationship above all else.
Yeah.
Mine with you and yours with others. And so all of these things come from, I think, unmet expectation and disappointment because there was desire. And what do we do when we're frustrated?
Yeah, that's so true. I think looking at all of these and even looking at verse 17 through 20, I think a lot of times we can look at the line and say, okay, how close can I get or how far can I get? And the Pharisees or the spiritual leaders at the time saw all these things and then put tons and tons of safeguards to not get close, but to get, bump up against it. And I think a lot of times, like, the Lord, not only, like, looking at James and things like that, like, not only does he want us to avoid these things, but he wants to teach us things in working the heart muscle in that, of not having anger, that he wants to produce the fruit of self-control, the fruit of love, but we're okay not learning those lessons or not receiving the things that the Lord has us and actually wrestling with the thing he's teaching us. I think of like a bike. Like when we're learning how to ride a bike, we put training wheels to not fall, but we don't get the benefit of learning how to balance on a bike. We don't get that thing, but we don't fall. And I think the Pharisees kind of ran into that. They're like, we don't want the pain of falling, so we're going to put all these safeguards to never fall. But the Lord's like, I'm trying to teach you how to balance on a bike.
That's good.
And do this right. And have your faith, like it talks about in James, perfected. Like working out those things. And we don't actually, like, Jesus, I think here is saying, you're not learning how to balance. You have done all the other things. I actually need to take training wheels off. And you haven't killed anyone, but you have so much hate in your heart.
Yeah.
And you haven't learned the gift of loving someone in the midst of offense, in the midst of anger. And I'm trying to produce the fruit of loving you.
So
And
good.
you haven't given me the opportunity because you have just stayed on the
Wow.
outskirts of it.
So good.
It's really good.
And that's what legalism is.
Yes.
That's what a works-based mentality is.
Yes.
And so, yes, I'm excited to.
The Pharisees get a bad rap,
Yeah.
and rightfully so. Jesus goes at them pretty hard.
He does. Yeah.
I imagine when they started making up these extra rules, it was out of a desire to not break the law.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was out of
Yes,
a good
totally.
desire.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, let's make this harder on people, maybe. But I think there was good desire. But what it was is, in many ways, legalism sets up a self-religion, a self-idolatry. I can do this. I
Yeah.
can keep the rules.
Yeah.
And if I just do this with
Yeah.
these training wheels, I'm able to do it on my own.
Exactly.
And it doesn't point us to Jesus and our need for him
Yeah.
and our need for grace and our need for him to work in our heart to produce fruit, not just so we don't do the
Not do the thing, but
Yeah.
also he wants to grow something in us.
Yeah.
Not just the extreme of, oh my gosh, I'm going to kill someone, I'm going to have hate. But he's like, I also want to teach you the extreme on the other side of
Yeah.
like dying to yourself.
Loving your
and
enemy.
loving without abandonment that you may get burned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think even in the first one, we so try and find letters of the law to follow, where it's like, well, and you mentioned this in your sermon, but I grew up in the same kind of culture in church where it was like, well, I just don't call somebody a fool, because you saying you fool is what
I'll
gets
call
you
you
in
an
danger.
idiot all day
But
long.
that's but
Moron.
That's the same.
Yes.
No, keep going.
Yeah,
I'll write
I
down.
will.
But that is legalism. We're just doing it a different way. We're like mirroring what the Pharisees were doing with their other rules by creating another rule instead of really trying to listen to the heart. And I really loved how you broke down the progression of how anger in your heart takes you towards dehumanization, and eventually the act of murder doesn't seem so far off. So
Yeah.
would you explain that for a second? Because I think this is the first time I've heard it laid out in that way, and I just thought it was really good.
So as Jesus breaks it down, he breaks it down where you have anger, and then anger does lead to essentially name calling. So sorry for calling you a moron. And
Now I'm starting to think you believed it.
No.
At first, I thought it was an example, but
so anger would be the idea of like, I'm mad at what you did. And then when you start to have contempt, you start to call names, you start to give identities on people. You are this.
Yep.
You are, and then from there, where he talks about calling them a fool, throwing back to Proverbs wisdom literature would have been akin to saying your life is worthless. If you are a fool, the fool doesn't. And so once you have moved from just I'm mad at what you did all the way to you are worthless. Well, you are worthless. It's not a giant leap to your life is worthless.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where really in these first two specifically, Jesus is setting up the root of how we get to the action. It's setting up when desire gives way to sin and sin gives way to death, and so that murder just doesn't happen. You don't wake up one day and all of a sudden I'm going to go murder.
Yeah.
It starts with the mind and thoughts and anger and then identity statements over people that don't agree with what God says about them, and then their life doesn't even have value. And once you're there, it doesn't mean you'll automatically go into murder, but it just once you've gone there in your mind, it's not a big leap. Is I think what that trajectory is, what that looks
it's
like.
that negative meditation, negative rumination. You're just ruminating on this
Yes.
idea. And you've watched like the Forensic Files or whatever when I first saw that show, but I used to watch it growing up, and which is a weird sentence, but whatever. And but they have these stories of people who do the ultimate act of murder, and when they're talking about the mental state that they're in, they start to convince themselves that life for everyone around them is actually better without the other person. These are the ones that are like acts of passion they're premeditated, and it's just why. And this is of course the extreme. And we're not saying that everybody has that in their heart like today, but that's how it gets there. Is you just negatively ruminate. And you're like, actually, this person is making my life worse. Actually, this person is making everybody's life worse. Actually, this would be better off without. And then you get to that place where you've twisted the perception of another person in such a way that their life is of more value gone, which is the ultimate version of what we're talking about here. But it's that negative rumination, that negative meditation, really, on that idea.
So Jesus' invitation or call to us, I believe, is when he says, if you have something against your brother, leave your gift at the altar and go and to be reconciled with them. And we talked about Matthew 18. It's when you have something against them or they have something against you. At either point, our job as Christ followers in the kingdom is to as much as I can that I'm going to go and have reconciliation with people. I wish I had said this better yesterday, or I don't think I said it at all, but I wonder how much of that invitation, and in today's world is even harder, but is to get people face to face so that they can see the humanity in the person.
Wow, yes.
Because when you're ruminating on their negative attributes, you're dehumanizing them.
Yeah.
And so when you go to them, not send a text, not even, maybe even a phone call, but actually face to face, have a conversation with someone. This is a human.
Yeah.
And now it brings back their humanity and you're able to reconcile. It doesn't mean that
So good.
everything is perfect and fixed. I just wonder if that wasn't part of Jesus' plan of saying, get together, see each other, look in each other's eyes, have the conversation, rather than just ruminating on it by yourself, getting some allies by telling them and talking to them and getting them on your side, and then maybe you can gang up on them online. Like, that's not what he's saying. No, go.
Come on.
But not mention them.
But don't- yeah.
Vague book.
Vague book. Yes.
So anyway, I don't think I said that, but I just think so much of it is this invitation to have face-to-face conversations in the midst of conflict, which, guys, I hate. I don't want to have conflict. Like, this is where I'm like, oh, God, why does it have to start with me?
Yeah.
And I think, too, we all have different personalities. And I think in regards to anger or conflict, I've heard that there's the bear, there's the groundhog, and there's the fox.
Go Bears.
And so, and so it's like the bear is the person who their anger is expressed externally.
Sure.
Oh, I'm frustrated. We're going to talk about this. Then there's the groundhog who's like, we're just going to stuff and go underground, and we're going to try to fix it down here. And then there's the fox who's a bit like they kind of play both, and can kind of be a little maybe manipulative or conniving or kind of. And so I just think, though, even as we haven't gone into this part of the Sermon on the Mount, but like, or actually, no, we did. What about turning the other cheek? Yeah, retaliation. I think we've kind of, in trying to do anger well, we've just like, the godly thing to do is just to like suppress it, bury it. I'm going to hide behind my screen. I'm going to hide. I think we've interpreted, Jesus meant go hide. Turn the other cheek and hide your anger. You know, like that's what godliness looks like. And so I think that we have missed, actually his goal was restoration. You know, his goal wasn't that you're not angry. His goal was that, no, like the relationship would be restored.
Exactly.
And so that's the
Having
higher
the
fruit.
gift to reconcile and be
Yeah.
patient and work through things, be long-suffering.
And
Like-
see where maybe you were wrong.
Yes.
And the humility,
Yeah.
like that's the deeper level too, is like to actually talk means to like, I got to admit that I'm potentially wrong.
Yeah.
And that, you know, you hurt me, but I probably hurt you too.
Yeah.
And so admitting that fault. But I think that, I feel like, yes, that's so hard. And in relationship with people that we know, that is a possibility. But I think so much anger that I see in society, and where anger is just growing,
Yes.
is not actually relationship, but it's because of issues in the world, things that we can't fix, things
Yeah.
that we can't control, and that we're just ruminating online together with our anger. And so just what do we, as believers now, applying this, what does that look like? I feel like it always comes back to things online. And it's like, should we just unplug?
Sure.
Like, do we just need to, like, how do we, when we can't do the restoration,
Yeah.
what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the reason it's so prevalent online, the reason is because we feed it, right? Like, not we like individually, although that's true too, but like there's money to be made in feeding that system, and so we're gonna feed the system. Like, that's what happens. And so I think it makes sense that it often comes back to online because we're, it's being fed. But I think the more that we can drive conversation offline, the better.
Yes.
And so I think that's part of the equation is how do we say, thanks for your input, let's get a phone call, let's get lunch,
Yep.
let's talk in person. That may not always be possible. And I think the other dynamic that's happening here that you're pointing out is that we now exist in a culture of, the phrase is identity politics, but I don't want to say politics. But identity, where you like raise the flag. This is my identity. I am a Christian, and I'm this kind of Christian, or I am a whatever, and I'm this kind of whatever. And so we all kind of like run to those little corners, and then to speak to the dehumanizing thing, we're not even throwing rocks online at a person. We're throwing it at an identity that we're attaching people to, and assuming that somebody who raised their hand for one thing believes all of those other sub things underneath it, and it just furthers the dehumanization. And it's so
Yes.
easy to be mad at somebody when you're not mad at somebody, you're mad at some image of something. It's
An ideology.
it's an ideology. Exactly. It's the idea of like road rage wouldn't be as bad if we could all hear into each other's cars. You know what I mean? But if you're separate in your car and you're mad at somebody, it's easier to be mad at them because they're far away. It's the same
Well, and
thing.
I think this is the beauty of church.
Yeah.
And being a Jesus people is like, okay, I could go to church online. I could just get together with my group of friends who all think like me, sound like me.
Yeah.
And it's like the beauty of the body is that like we have all different opinions. And can we remember that like the Jesus way is our way? This is our
Yeah.
standard.
Yes.
And so it's like everything,
Ugh.
ideologies, we filter through this lens. And so I think that's also our hope. It's like, okay, I can think differently than you, but like my hope is that what unifies us is that Jesus is our standard. And so that everything is going to be submitted through that. And so then we can have differences of opinion in the playing out. And I just love your point about like actually having conversations about it.
Yeah.
But we're terrified too.
Oh, yeah.
We are terrified.
But so I think saying the same thing, our online discourse, internet life, YouTube, TikTok, whatever, fuels
Follow
anger.
us. Follow us on TikTok.
It fuels. It's anger gasoline, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't think that we should be people who are like, oh, get offline,
Right.
bury your head, don't know what's going on.
Totally.
I do think we should be aware, where am I getting my information? How am I consuming this information?
And what is it doing?
And so are there some things we should go away from?
Yeah.
You know, I probably, this isn't the place I should get my news,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
But then when we feel anger kind of within us towards an identity of people,
Yeah.
I don't think it's a bad idea to think, okay, is there anyone that is as close to that as possible that I can go and reconcile with and go have a
Wow.
conversation with?
That's
And
great.
So, though I can't fix it all out there,
Totally.
do I know anyone that I can go and see face to face,
That's
look
so
in their
good.
eyes, hear their story, share my pain, hear their pain, apologize for what I've done wrong, listen to them, give them opportunity. They may or may not. I don't know but is
Yeah.
that a way? This is only for my own heart.
Absolutely.
This is for
Totally
my own
selfish.
good. Yeah, this is selfish motivation
Yes.
here.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
anyway,
Well, I think what you're saying is really, really beautiful because I even think of the book of Acts where Paul and Peter are having this debate, and they represent the debate of do new Christians who are Gentiles have to follow the law? And what they do is don't create two separate religions. They go to the council in Jerusalem, and they all just lay it out before each other and the Lord, and they just duke it out. Here's why. Here's why.
Yes.
God, what are you saying? Here's why it's important. And then when they come to they come out of that not necessarily 100% on the same page, or not even
chummy.
necessarily liking each other, but they come out having submitted to one another and submitted to Jesus. And that's a beautiful picture of what to do with anger, because you can't imagine the person that Peter was and the person that Paul was, that they weren't mad. Those dudes ran hot, you know, so they were probably mad. And there was anger, but in their anger, instead of the negative rumination, they actually physically removed themselves. I mean, he left the mission field to go back to Jerusalem to work it out, which is pretty wild, you know. I think that's a really beautiful example of Jesus teaching
Yes.
on anger being reconciled even in the New
Yes.
Testament.
So good.
So I think that's exactly what you're saying,
And
or
they had
similar.
just been with Jesus.
I know.
And things are high, you know?
So, in the name of not having a 3-hour podcast, I don't know if we should move
Sure.
forward to the next one. I think of where Scripture says, "In your anger, do not sin." Anger is an emotion. Anger in it, though. So I'm going to be careful, because where Jesus says, you know, don't have anger, compares it with murder. But when we feel that emotion of anger, the question is, what do I do with it? And okay, I can't necessarily always respond to my first initial emotion, though I probably can look at what am I doing in my life that I'm accessible to that, or that would come up. But what do I do with it? I have anger. What do I do? And Jesus' invitation is to go talk to people and go and, in humility, go reconcile. And so I think that the more we can try to do that, to be the first to move towards another person, to respond towards another person, to
Say it.
bring unity.
Say first responder.
I'm not going to
Say
say
it.
I was going to be moving. And so this is where Jesus, it's such a big deal in John 17 that he prays that his disciples, that his people would be one. I just think he really cares about it. And in a culture that is constantly dividing,
Yeah.
would we be those? They will know you are my disciples by the way you love each other.
Not agree,
Yeah.
not believe all the same things. Like, it's by how you love. And actually, love is, I'm probably wrong in a way, and I'm probably right, and you're probably wrong, and you're probably right. Let's
Yeah.
talk about
Let's figure it out. So good. Last thoughts? No?
It's good.
Well, the next section, he tackles the idea of adultery, but he starts at the place from if in your heart you lust after a woman. And so that's the beginning of that. And you drew a direct connection that it builds on the last one in that it dehumanizes a person. So you're looking to take somebody for your own gratification, even if it's just in
Yeah.
your mind.
Yeah, I think these two are very similar in their interpretation and what Jesus was saying. I mean, it's kind of like he's saying, hey, when you get angry, it ultimately leads to you devaluing their humanity, treating them as if they're worthless, dehumanizing them. Speaking of dehumanizing, stop it with, don't just think that you can't commit adultery. Like when you lust after someone
Yeah.
and you see them not as someone to love, but as someone to consume, which
Yeah.
is like, this is what lust is I want you for my pleasure. He's like, you are doing the same thing in your heart. And so I think that, and this is an obvious one that let's just a whole podcast about online activity. This is
For
another
real.
obvious one that in our world today is so prevalent, so accessible. It's always been every one of these. You can't look at any of these and be like, "Oh, that's such an old-timey thing."
I know.
All of these are like, "Oh my gosh, this is the world we live in."
Yeah, exactly.
But I would even say one of the unique things to the day we live in is the speed and accessibility of these things.
Yeah.
It's not just, they've always been a part of the human condition.
Yeah.
Now the speed at which we can have them and the accessibility of them make it to where this is such a big deal. And so Jesus is just saying, deal with this ruthlessly. You know, like this is don't dehumanize people. Don't lust after them. And this is a big deal. So I think that it mostly, we could land here and talk about it for a while, but it mostly is a similar conversation to anger, where he's saying, you're trying to stay away from the act that everybody knows is wrong. I'm telling you, let's look at the seeds that are going on that will lead to that. And if we can capture that there, then we won't have to deal with this down the road.
Well, and I think it's interesting comparing even just the anger and adultery. Like one is saying, I so devalue you, I need to get rid of you for my life to be better. And one is saying, I don't value you, but I need you for my life to get better. And so it's like this taking control of desire and need. And one, I'm angry. So it's just interesting how it's like I feel like getting at the root of need. Like one is a need of like, away with you, my life will be better. I need you for my life to be better. And so I don't know.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I've never thought about that. That's really fascinating. I think it goes to the locus of control too. Like I want to control the relationships in my life. You know what I mean? Has something to do with that, which is trying to meet a need. Is exactly what you're saying. I think that's really a fascinating way to think about that. And we've completely dehumanized this process. And again, like there's money to be made to get you to be angry and to get you to lust. So it's being shoved at you all the time. But it's so clear from Jesus that it is firmly our responsibility to run from run from lust. So it's not our responsibility to have it something never cross our eyes, but it is our responsibility to do the best we can, but to run from it, to put ourselves in a better scenario. Had experience with my family, a lot in my family of people who are struggle with addiction, in particular alcoholism. And so one thing that they talk about in AA is if there's a liquor store on the way home and you always stop at that liquor store, drive a different way home. And there's a whole lot of wisdom in that, but to the same token, an alcoholic's not gonna be able to watch a football game without seeing a beer commercial. And so for them to say, I'm gonna completely not watch a TV anymore and I'm gonna go live in the mountains, doesn't work, and that's that particular situation. I think the same is true with us. And I think that sometimes in the effort to control or want control, we try and put our lust issues on other people. And so we go, you can't dress like this because I'm going to lust, or you can't put that, we can't watch the whatever because there's going to be a commercial. And it's like, okay, well, there has to be a certain amount of, in my heart, I'm running from this. Like, so that if I go to, like, I grew up in Southern California, if you go to the beach, it's not like I can be like, well, I guess I'm never going to go to the beach again. People are wearing next to nothing at the beach. Yeah, ponchos. I'm just walking around with ponchos. Here's that doesn't work. Yeah. But at the same time, so anyway, so there's an interesting dynamic there where it's just very clear, and the same thing with anger, where the responsibility is on you.
Can we just talk real practically about this one, where I think that there are practical though hedges.
Yes.
And I feel like, kind of growing up in church and stepping into puberty, and it's like learning about our sexuality.
Yeah.
Like that. This is always a conversation about like what hedges are we putting up. And so I think I would just love to ask, like, practically, you're advising the person on the other side of the screen. What are hedges? what do we do? We can't pass out ponchos, but what are some practical things that you do to help safeguard this area?
Yeah, I think number one, I think having a level of communication with other people
So good.
to point out routes that lead you in that direction. Like, I know people cutting me off and leads and stirs up anger in my heart. I know that watching certain things stirs that up, where maybe it's not a commercial about alcohol, but it's a commercial saying, scan here for free alcohol. You know what I mean? And understanding, like, having a conversation where someone else can point out, hey, every time you've said you've struggled with this, this has preceded it. Or having those dialogues to even point out, like, where are the check engine lights with that? And understanding yourself of, like, hey, I'm not fully refined in this area, so maybe I can't watch the Super Bowl right now because it's too triggering for me.
Yeah.
But it's not putting it on everyone else, but saying, for me, like, can we have a conversation and just analyze where are the weak places in my heart?
Yeah.
Where are the weak areas?
Yeah.
And what I can't partake in right now in my spiritual maturity in living in
Yeah.
lust and all of those things and being able to be open and transparent about
So I
that.
think what you're saying is that you have someone to talk to about it.
Yes.
That you're willing to be honest with.
Yep.
And I think what I would just want to say is, sadly, I think for most Christians, they probably don't have that. And that they don't, and I just want to acknowledge, like, we are all human beings with a body. And
Yes.
so with that, this is having sexual integrity lasts from our whole lives.
Yeah.
And so that this is a conversation that it's a struggle.
Yes.
It's a fight for all of these things are a fight for all of us.
Right.
We
Yeah.
don't graduate.
Right.
Now we get
That's so good.
stronger.
Yep.
But we have to keep working a muscle. It's a muscle that doesn't just go away. So I
Yes.
just want to acknowledge, like, finding someone that you can be brutally honest with. And I think I just want to say, like, it's something that we all have to be honest about. Like, no one
Yeah.
is exempt
Yes.
from managing and stewarding this part of us.
Totally.
And I
so
think
to talk about it.
I think it'd even be more than having someone. I think someone's. I
Yeah,
think having,
totally.
you know, for me, like a brotherhood, a group of some kind, where I just know this will be a part of the conversation. And it may not always be the conversation, but it'll always be possibly a part of the conversation. Or I have someone who is older than me. And we've had conversations that they can, at any time, just ask me any question. And they have that right in my life. And you know, or our relationship where you have access to everything I'm doing and ask me questions. So I think it's more than just my someone, because
sure.
I can, you can,
You can deceive.
yeah,
everybody.
yeah. And so I think it's, and probably for everyone, this is where it is interesting you bringing up, like, alcoholism.
Yeah.
It is different for every single person. And I would never look at an alcoholic that says, I drive a different way home and think, oh, let me dumb that down. You don't need
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah.
That's too high, because I don't know their story.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when we start to name, you got to do this or don't do that, that's too much. Yeah, it gets, like, when someone is like, I have set a boundary in my life because this is, I know what it does to me.
Yep.
I think for us to honor that in people
Yeah, champion
and champion it
Yeah.
and say, I'll help you with that, is certainly one of the parts. I think one of the things, though, with what Jesus is saying is when he says, if your hand causes you sin, cut it off. If your eye causes you sin, gouge it out. And this is one of those moments where we read this as Jesus, what he is, the heart of what he's saying, really what he's saying. I don't think, and we've talked about this in councils where we're not talking about mutilizing ourselves, but the ruthlessly taking care of these things.
Yeah.
And I heard one message that I loved where Jesus is taking this to a heart motivation. And they said, because you could cut off every part. You could cut off your hand. You could gouge out your eyes.
Yeah.
You could, any part, and you will still have a heart. And so if you don't deal with the heart,
Yeah.
then
Yes.
you will still find ways to lust. And so ultimately there
Absolutely.
is this, yes, we can put up, and we should put up guidelines,
Yes.
boundaries, all these
Yes.
things. But if we don't deal with the heart will find its way through them.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what Jesus was addressing in terms of dealing with the heart, not at the forsaking of firewalls,
Yeah.
but that ultimately we do deal with the heart, and I think that honestly even begins with the conversation with him. And when the commercial happens and I start like asking questions, why am I feeling this?
Yes.
Why? Get curious about it. Why
Yeah.
is this causing me? Why am I drawn to this? And asking those questions with the Lord,
Yeah.
and having
Yeah.
good, healthy conversations with
Yep.
with friends and partners and comrades.
Yeah, because I think on the other side of this, like I said earlier, like the Lord wants to produce something out of this. Like he wants to produce not just a anti-dehumanization, but he also wants you to like understand the situation rightly and produce self-control and understand this isn't wrong. Like this is God, like the Imago Dei and someone else.
Yes.
And there is an injustice happening there. There is something, and he wants to build self-control. He wants to build in a purity in us that is undefiled, that we have clean hands and a pure heart, and actually approach this and say, no, there's a person on the other side of that lust. There is someone that the Lord wants to be all a people worshiping him, and we can't do that if you're looking at them as a tool of gratification, something else. And he wants to switch things in your heart and have victory and have self-control in a way that we can love others and show like
Yeah.
a greater thing in that.
Yeah, and properly ordered sexuality
Yes.
is a picture of God.
Yes.
Oneness generating life. I mean,
Yes.
that's properly
Yes.
ordered sexuality. And so that's the other side of it. It's like to
Yes.
see see the beauty in being able to two people come together as one and then create and generate life, create a little microcosm of the kingdom of God.
Yes.
That's the idea. And we lose out on that when we try and take, this is the
Yes.
language
Yes.
of Eve, right? To take, take and try and consume rather than see the beauty that can actually image God in a family when it's rightly ordered. Yeah.
And I think I heard a podcast recently where they were talking about, I love you used the word sexual integrity, but they were talking about our sexuality and equating it to the idea of a fire. And when contained within a fire pit, a fire is a beautiful thing. We gather together, we cook food on it, is what we want. When set free out in the forest, it's
That's so good.
destructive. And so, to your point, this is a part of us that God made to be beautiful, and when in the context of a man and a woman in marriage, and when ordered rightly, this is beautiful, life-giving, this is right. But in a society that says, hey, light the forest on fire,
Yeah.
it will bring destruction. And so what is the fire pit? and so I do think, talking about marriage, talking about a husband and wife, and then in our day where there's such easy access to do what Jesus is talking about here, where it looks at a woman with lust in their heart or lustful intent, talking about what are ways that we can, this is trying to kill me, and so what do I want to run from it, not see how close I can get to it. And this is the idea of the athlete trying to tightrope the out of bounds, or the kid trying to walk on the curb. Your momentum very rarely, if ever, pulls you back into the safe zone or back inbounds.
Yeah,
Your
totally.
momentum always leads you out of bounds, off the curb, and so you can self-correct and go back into inbound. But I think that we got to know, I got to stay away from that. And so in a life-giving way, not in a fear and religious, I got to earn it, but in a, I don't want this thing that's trying to kill me, it's trying to consume me. I don't want that. And so defining those things, and I don't know if we've done what you asked.
Who knows?
Very practical things. Let me just say, I did want to say one thing, because this is not a male or a female issue. This is a
Totally.
human condition issue.
Yes.
And this is, I would say more than ever, I guess I don't know that, but more than ever, I would say this is for men and women. That said, I also want to highlight that Jesus is looking at these men and said, anyone who looks at a woman lustfully, this is Jesus being a champion of women.
Yeah.
And this is
Yeah,
Jesus
that's good.
where he is saying, hey, guys, men, stop
Yes.
dehumanizing women.
Yeah.
And Jesus is the biggest women's champion. I mean,
Yeah.
and so this is one of those moments where he is looking at the ones that culturally it was okay to dehumanize.
Yeah.
Where maybe under anger and murder, they're murdering people that culturally it's not okay. But he's saying culturally, it's probably okay to dehumanize these ones. And I'm saying, no, they have value,
Yeah.
and he is sticking up for these
So
women.
good.
And so I just wanted to say that because I think that's a beautiful part of this part of Scripture.
And I think, just we could spend forever on each of these, I know. But, we are all in the context of married relationships, And so it's different. I think, there is, for the context of somebody who finds themselves married, there's a dynamic of this is being able to run to your spouse, continue to invest in that relationship.
Totally.
And with the view and the lens that a lifelong sexual relationship with that partner will only get better as time goes on, which is the opposite of what our world would say, And then I would just say to that, like if somebody finds themselves single, maybe single for their life, and maybe and this has never been my context, but somebody who has same-sex attraction has decided to be celibate. My encouragement just would be to find a community where you can lean in towards the beauty of God's goodness for your life. And so it doesn't mean that the only solution to running away from lust is that you have to get married.
Yeah.
So I don't want to communicate that just because that's our context. And we haven't said that. I don't think anybody's specifically said that. I just didn't want to leave this part of it without saying that.
good.
There is vibrant life in the midst of whatever context, whether you're single, and for whatever reason you're single or you're married, and there's a way to run towards the community that God has for you to see the beauty in life. That would be a part of the dynamic of running away from lust.
Yeah.
Would be to lean
Yeah,
into what
totally.
beauty does God have for me in community, deep relationship with people, whether or not that's a romantic, married, sexual relationship or not. So I just want to make sure I said that.
Yes.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
Do we want to
about
talk about
this
another one, or do we
No,
want to? What do we want to?
I don't know if we need a part 2 or 3 or
I
4.
don't know.
I don't know. But yeah, thanks guys for just. These are really important conversations to have, and I think it really works to talk about these first 2 together, because of the dehumanizing aspect, and because I
Yeah.
think Jesus is. We talked about like Jesus is saying, hey, these acts don't start with the act. They start in the heart. They start in your thought life, and so we need transformation at a heart level. And so I think that for all of us, that's the aim and that's the invitation. And maybe that's why it's hard to say, what are the boundaries to not be angry, but it's like, what are the things that we can do? And I just encourage people to, 1, pray about it. God, where have I fooled myself in thinking I am good because I'm not doing X, Y, Z?
Yeah.
But actually, I am allowing the seed of lust or the seed of murder to grow in my heart. And so asking the Lord, where have I lived like a Pharisee in this issue? And then, is there something that you would invite me to do to ruthlessly deal with this, to strongly deal with this, that might look wild to the world around me, but this is what the Lord's asked me to do? And if we're willing to have that conversation with him to start with, and then, to Eric's point, share that with somebody else. Share that with someone else and say, I'm inviting you into this process. And I want you to know, here's what I feel the Lord's invited me to do. And then, if we find ourselves falling short, to ask questions. Go back to the Lord. God,
Yeah.
why do I keep wrestling with this? Let me get curious. What's going on here? What is the feel? What am I trying to feed? Is it something that I'm trying to, is it the pleasure part? Is it the escapism? Is it the boredom? Like, God, let's just start asking questions and let the Lord walk with you, and then hopefully with somebody else.
Thanks for being with us at the Boulder Street Conversations podcast. Grateful that you would spend time with us. If you want to get more connected to our church, go to boulderstreet.org/connect. You can send us an email there, sign up for anything that we have. We'd love to get more connected with you. We'd love to see you on Sunday. We meet at 10 a.m. at 828 East Boulder Street.